Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went in there? Or been in the middle of a sentence and lost the word you were searching for, right on the tip of your tongue? Or maybe you put your keys down somewhere and had no idea where to find them 5 minutes later. Or you met someone at church, at a party, at the grocery store, someone whose name you absolutely know, and it just wouldn't come to you in that moment. If any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people over 60 experience these kinds of moments and quietly worry about what they mean. And I want to reassure you right away, having occasional memory slips does not mean something terrible is happening. The brain does change as we age, and that's completely natural. But here's what most people don't realize. Some of the things we do every single day are quietly making those memory problems much worse. Not aging itself, our daily habits. And that is both the difficult part and the hopeful part. Because if habits are the problem, then changing habits is the solution. You don't need a prescription for this. You don't need a fancy supplement or a complicated program. You just need to understand what's going wrong and make some real practical adjustments. That's exactly what we're going to do today. I've spent time looking at the research studies from universities like Vanderbilt, UCLA, Washington University, and Kyushu University in Japan. And I want to break all of this down in a way that's honest, clear, and actually useful for your life. So let's get into it. Here are 7 daily habits that could be slowly robbing your memory, and what you can start doing about each one. The first habit is one that almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one on this entire list. It's not sleeping enough, or not sleeping deeply enough. Here's something that will genuinely surprise you. While you're asleep, your brain is not resting. It's actually doing some of its most important work. Researchers at UC Berkeley discovered something remarkable. During deep sleep, the brain flushes out a toxic protein called beta amyloid. That's the same protein that builds up in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. Think of it like a cleaning crew that only shows up at night. If you don't give them enough time, the garbage piles up. Studies from Washington University School of Medicine found that even a single night of poor sleep causes beta amyloid levels in the brain to rise by as much as 25 to 30%. And a week of restless sleep can also cause a rise in another damaging protein called tau, which is associated with brain tissue damage. What's striking is that after a bad night, these toxic protein levels were similar to what's seen in people who are genetically predisposed to developing Alzheimer's at a young age. Now, there's something else happening during sleep that's just as important. Sleep is when your brain consolidates memories. It takes everything you learned and experienced during the day and files it properly for long-term storage. Without enough deep sleep, those memories don't get saved. They're like a document you forgot to hit save on before closing the computer. After 60, your sleep naturally becomes lighter and more fragmented. Deep sleep stages become shorter. This means the cleaning process is already less efficient than it used to be, which is exactly why poor sleep habits become so much more damaging at this stage of life. So what does this mean for you? Doctors often recommend aiming for 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night and being consistent about what time you go to bed and wake up, even on weekends. Your bedroom should be cool, dark, and quiet. Avoid screens for at least an hour before bed, because the blue light they emit can interfere with your sleep hormones. And if you snore heavily or feel tired even after a full night's rest, talk to your doctor about sleep apnea, which is extremely common in older adults and very treatable. One more thing worth mentioning here: napping. A short nap of 20 to 30 minutes in the early afternoon can actually be beneficial for memory consolidation in older adults. But long naps over an hour or napping too late in the day can interfere with nighttime sleep quality. So keep daytime naps short and timed well, and think of them as a supplement to good nighttime sleep, not a replacement for it. Sleep is genuinely one of the most powerful and underappreciated tools you have for protecting your memory, and it costs you nothing. The second habit that quietly damages memory is something most people in their 60s don't even think of as a problem. It's sitting too much throughout the day. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but I go for a walk every morning, and that's wonderful, truly. But here's the part that a major 2025 study from Vanderbilt University and the University of Pittsburgh revealed, and it genuinely surprised the researchers themselves. Even people who exercise regularly showed signs of brain shrinkage and cognitive decline if they spent a lot of time sitting throughout the rest of their day. The study followed more than 400 adults over 50 for 7 years, tracking both their exercise habits and their total sedentary time using wearable monitors. The finding was sobering. More sitting time was associated with smaller brain volume in areas critical for memory and a higher risk of developing dementia, regardless of how much exercise those people got. As lead researcher Dr. Marissa Gongyat explained it, reducing your risk for Alzheimer's disease is not just about working out once a day, it's about what you do for the other 23 hours. Here's why this matters. When you sit for long stretches without moving, blood flow to the brain slows down. The brain is a hungry organ. It needs a continuous, rich supply of oxygen and glucose to function well. When that supply is reduced, memory centers start to suffer. Over time, the area of the brain most responsible for forming new memories, called the medial temporal lobe, can actually start to thin and shrink. The good news is that small, frequent movement breaks can make a real difference. Research suggests that getting up and moving for even 2 to 3 minutes every 30 to 45 minutes can help keep blood flowing well to the brain. You don't need to do anything intense. Standing up, doing a few stretches, walking to the kitchen for a glass of water, it all counts. Think about setting a gentle timer if you tend to sit for long periods, reading, watching television, or using a computer. Your brain will thank you. The third habit is one that's deeply tied to our emotional and social lives, especially during retirement, and that habit is spending too much time alone, becoming socially isolated. This one is not about blaming anyone. Life gets quieter as we get older. Friends move away. Grandchildren grow up. Spouses and close friends pass on. Retirement can reduce the built-in social contact that work once provided. These are real and painful changes, but the effect on the brain is something we cannot ignore. A major study published in the journal Neurology, involving nearly 9,000 older adults in Japan, found that people who rarely saw or spoke with friends or relatives had noticeably smaller brain volumes, particularly in the hippocampus and amygdala, the regions most closely involved in memory and emotional processing. Socially isolated participants also had more areas of microscopic damage in the brain's white matter, which is the tissue responsible for sending signals between different brain regions. Separate research published through the European Union's Life Leipzig study confirmed that social isolation contributes to brain atrophy and cognitive decline within individuals over time, not just as a correlation between different people, but as a change that happens inside the same person as they become more isolated. The reason seems to be this: conversation, laughter, debate, and connection are incredibly stimulating for the brain. When you're talking with someone, your brain is working hard following their words, formulating your response, reading emotional cues, managing your own feelings. This kind of mental activity keeps neural pathways active and strong. Without it, those pathways start to weaken from disuse. Doctors often recommend making social connection a real priority, not just when convenient, but as a deliberate, scheduled part of your week. Phone calls count, video calls count, a weekly card game, a community class, a volunteer role, a walking group. All of these help. And if you're in a situation where getting out is difficult, even small steps toward more connection can make a measurable difference. There's also something powerful about intergenerational connection, spending time with younger people, whether that's grandchildren, neighbors, or people you meet through volunteering. Research suggests that mixing with people of different ages is particularly stimulating for the brain because it exposes you to different perspectives, different references, and different kinds of conversation. Your stories and your experience are genuinely valuable, and sharing them keeps your mind engaged in deeply meaningful ways. Don't underestimate how much staying connected to the people around you does for your brain every single day. The fourth habit brings us to something that many people experience but rarely connect to memory: living under chronic stress. We all know that stress feels unpleasant, but what most people don't realize is that prolonged stress actually causes physical changes inside the brain, changes that directly impair your ability to form and retrieve memories. Here's how it works. When you're under stress, your brain triggers the release of a hormone called cortisol. In small, short bursts, cortisol is actually useful. It sharpens focus and prepares the body for a challenge. But when cortisol levels stay high for weeks, months, or years, the brain starts to suffer serious damage. Research from multiple institutions has shown that aging humans with chronically elevated cortisol levels had significantly smaller hippocampal volume, meaning the memory center of the brain was literally shrinking under the pressure. One study found that older adults with significantly prolonged cortisol elevations showed a hippocampus that was up to 14% smaller than those with more moderate cortisol levels, and their performance on memory tasks was correspondingly worse. The degree of memory impairment correlated directly with how high their cortisol was and how long it had been elevated. Now, the brain after 60 is already somewhat more vulnerable to these effects. The feedback systems that normally tell the body to stop producing cortisol become a little less efficient as we age, so chronic stress hits harder and lingers longer. What kinds of things keep cortisol elevated? Ongoing worry, financial anxiety, relationship conflict, caregiving stress, loneliness, and even just a constant diet of negative news. Many of these are real and unavoidable, but how we respond to them is something we can work on. Research suggests that regular relaxation practices, things like deep breathing, gentle yoga, meditation, or even simply spending quiet time in nature, can help lower cortisol levels over time. Exercise is also one of the most effective stress reducers we know of, and having someone to talk to, a friend, a counselor, or a support group, can make an enormous difference in how heavily chronic stress weighs on the brain. Another surprisingly powerful tool is something called reframing. This is the practice of consciously choosing how you interpret a stressful situation. It doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means asking yourself whether the thing you're worrying about is something you can actually influence. And if not, deliberately choosing to redirect your energy. Worry that has no productive outlet is one of the most corrosive forms of stress the brain deals with. Practices like journaling, prayer, and even simply discussing worries out loud with someone you trust can help break the cycle of rumination that keeps cortisol elevated long after a stressful event has passed. Managing stress is not a luxury at this stage of life. It is one of the most direct and powerful things you can do to protect your memory. The fifth habit is one that many people find hard to hear because it involves something they genuinely enjoy, and that's eating a diet heavy in ultra-processed foods. Let me be very clear here. This is not about being perfect or giving up all the foods you love. It's about understanding what the research is consistently showing us, and then making thoughtful choices. A major study published in the journal Neurology in 2024 found that people who ate the most ultra-processed foods, things like packaged chips, sugary drinks, frozen meals, processed meats, and fast food, had a meaningfully higher risk of developing memory and thinking problems compared to those who ate less of these foods. Another 2025 study from the Framingham Heart Study, one of the longest-running health studies in history, linked high ultra-processed food consumption to an increased risk of both dementia and Alzheimer's disease specifically. And the mechanisms make sense. These foods are typically high in added sugar, unhealthy fats, and artificial additives, while being extremely low in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Chronically high blood sugar, which results from regularly eating these foods, causes inflammation throughout the body, including in the brain. It also damages the blood vessels that supply the brain with oxygen and nutrients. Over time, this vascular damage can quietly accelerate cognitive decline. Now here's the interesting part. You don't have to overhaul everything at once. Research supports a very simple idea. Adding more whole foods gradually does a lot of good. More vegetables, more fruit, more legumes like beans and lentils, more whole grains, more fish. Even small steps in this direction have been associated with better brain health. Doctors often point to the Mediterranean-style eating pattern as one of the most brain-protective approaches we know of. And the good news is that it's genuinely delicious. Olive oil, fish, fresh vegetables, nuts, and fruit are at its center. As always, talk to your doctor or a dietitian before making major dietary changes, especially if you have existing health conditions. And here's a reassuring thought. Dietary changes don't have to be all or nothing to make a difference. Studies suggest that even partially shifting toward more whole foods can have meaningful benefits. If you currently eat processed foods most days, simply adding more vegetables, nuts, or fish to your existing meals, without removing everything you enjoy, is a genuine step forward. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is a consistent trend in a healthier direction. Small swaps made regularly, like choosing an apple over a bag of chips or water over a sugary drink, compound into real protection for your brain over months and years. And the sooner you start, the more time your brain has to benefit. The sixth habit might be the most surprising one on this list, because it's something the body does quietly, without causing obvious symptoms. And most people over 60 are doing it every single day. That habit is not drinking enough water. As we age, the body's ability to retain water naturally declines. At the same time, the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable. Many older adults simply don't feel thirsty the way they did when they were younger. But that doesn't mean their body doesn't need water. It just means the warning system isn't working as efficiently. Research is now very clear about what dehydration does to the brain. Studies have found that the brain is approximately 75% water. Even a loss of just 1 to 2% of body fluids, an amount you might not even notice, can start to impair working memory, focus, and executive function. Research published in the European Journal of Nutrition found that among older women, lower hydration levels were directly linked to lower scores on cognitive tests, measuring attention and memory. And here's the longer-term concern. Emerging research links habitual low fluid intake to reduced brain volume and diminished cognitive performance in older adults over time. Chronic dehydration also reduces cerebral blood flow, meaning less oxygen and glucose reaching the very parts of the brain that are responsible for memory formation. The practical recommendation from most health professionals is to aim for around 6 to 8 cups of water or other non-caffeinated, non-alcoholic fluids per day. Though individual needs vary, don't wait until you feel thirsty to drink. By then, you may already be mildly dehydrated. Try to start your morning with a glass of water before anything else. Keep a water bottle visible and nearby throughout the day. And remember that many fruits and vegetables also contribute to your daily fluid intake. Cucumber, watermelon, oranges, and soups all help. If you're taking any medications that act as diuretics, talk to your doctor about what hydration levels make sense for you specifically. One more thing to be aware of: coffee and tea, consumed in moderate amounts, do count toward your daily fluid intake. Despite older beliefs that caffeine was significantly dehydrating, current research suggests that moderate consumption, around 2 to 3 cups a day, does not significantly increase fluid loss. So your morning cup of tea or coffee is not the enemy here. What you do want to avoid is replacing water throughout the day almost entirely with alcohol, highly sweetened drinks, or energy drinks. These can actively worsen hydration and have their own negative effects on brain health. Think of water as the baseline and everything else as an addition. A well-hydrated brain simply works better, clearer thinking, sharper recall, steadier mood. It's one of the simplest and least expensive things you can do for your mind. The seventh and final habit is the one that might be the hardest to change, because it's both very common and very comfortable, and that is spending long stretches of time doing mentally passive activities, particularly watching television or scrolling through social media for hours each day without any mental challenge. Now please understand, rest and relaxation are genuinely important. Watching a favorite show or scrolling through photos of your grandchildren is not harmful and can bring real joy. The concern is specifically about spending the majority of your waking hours in a purely passive mental state, week after week, month after month, without giving your brain real challenges to work through. The brain is like a muscle in a very important way. It needs to be used. Neural pathways that are regularly exercised stay strong. Ones that are neglected start to weaken. When you're simply watching content that requires no response, no problem solving, no memory, and no creativity, the brain doesn't get the workout it needs to stay sharp. Studies consistently show that mentally stimulating activities, things like reading books, playing cards or board games, doing crosswords or puzzles, learning a new skill, playing a musical instrument, or even taking a class in something you've always been curious about, are linked to significantly slower rates of cognitive decline and a meaningfully lower risk of dementia. A large study of more than 29,000 older adults found that habits like regularly reading, playing games, and engaging in learning activities were associated with a lower risk of dementia and a slower rate of memory decline over time. The theory is that mentally engaging activities build what scientists call cognitive reserve, a kind of mental buffer that allows the brain to compensate for the physical changes that come with aging. Here's what makes this particularly hopeful. It's never too late to build that reserve. Research has found brain benefits from mental stimulation, even in people in their 70s and 80s. And the activities don't have to feel like homework. Learning to cook a new cuisine, joining a book club, picking up a new language on an app, or starting a garden all count. What matters is that your brain is actively engaged, curious, learning, working through something new. Try to replace at least 1 hour each day of purely passive screen time with something that genuinely challenges your mind. You don't have to be perfect. Even small, consistent changes accumulate into something meaningful over time. Now, there's an important distinction to draw here between passive and active screen use. Passively watching television or scrolling through social media without interacting is very different from using technology actively. For example, playing a brain training game, taking an online course, video chatting with family, or even writing emails that require thoughtful composition. Active, engaged use of technology can actually be stimulating. It's the passive, automatic, hour-after-hour consumption that the brain gets very little from. Some practical ideas that many people find genuinely enjoyable: picking up a memoir or novel and reading a chapter each evening instead of turning on the television, learning the history of a place you've always wanted to visit, taking a free online course on a topic you're curious about, teaching yourself basic cooking from a new culture, writing down memories from your life, a form of reminiscence that is not only mentally engaging but deeply personally meaningful, or simply spending time in real conversation with someone you care about. Which brings us full circle back to the importance of staying socially connected. The common thread through all of these is that your brain is producing, not just consuming, and that is exactly what keeps it healthy. So let's bring this all together, because if you take only one thing from everything we've talked about today, let it be this: the most powerful thing you can do for your memory is not found in a bottle or a clinic. It's found in your daily choices. Sleep matters. Movement matters. Connection matters. Managing stress matters. What you eat and drink matters. And keeping your mind actively engaged matters. Each of these 7 habits, on its own, has real, scientifically supported effects on your brain health. But when several of them are happening at the same time, and for many of us, they are, the combined impact on memory can be significant. The encouraging truth is that many of these habits are completely within your control. Small, steady changes, going to bed 30 minutes earlier, getting up from the couch a few more times each day, calling a friend, drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning. All of these add up, not overnight, but over weeks and months. They genuinely change the trajectory of your brain health. You deserve to stay sharp. You deserve to remember the things that matter to you. The names, the conversations, the moments with the people you love. And the research is increasingly clear that how you live each day plays a very large role in whether that happens. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which one of these 7 habits do you think has the biggest impact on your own memory and mental sharpness? Is it sleep? Is it staying social? Is it diet? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and your answer might help someone else who's going through the same thing. And if you found this helpful today, please consider subscribing. Every week we share new health tips designed specifically for people over 60. Evidence-based, warm and practical. No fear-mongering. No miracle cures. Just real information that you can actually use. We're glad you're here, and we'll see you in the next one.